Hello there. Welcome to the IWS Podcast. I'm your host, RJ, and I have a wonderful, wonderful guest with me this evening. Hello there, Sydney. How are you doing?
Hello, hello. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm ready to jump into this. We've
Yeah,
obviously had some very interesting discussions prior to us coming together today. So I want to really give you the opportunity in the space to be as open as you're willing to be, really share with our audience. The purpose of all these discussions is we're a mental health based platform. And we want to really make these discussions much more accessible to folks, particularly when we're talking about male and female relationship dynamics right now. So happy to have you here. And I want to go ahead and jump in a bit and start talking a little bit about you and your upbringing. So I wanted to ask you if you can share for us in the audience, what was it like for you growing up in your house with your family?
sure. So, I I grew up in LA, LA area, specifically like a city called Whittier, but it's a little bit suburby outside of LA. But I was always in the
Okay.
area. I am an only child, so I guess I would say that I probably feel like it was a little bit like I guess I was a little bit spoiled in some ways.
Okay.
Um, I had a lot of attention growing up. Like my family was very like my mom and dad. I grew up with my mom and dad. I should have said that first, but um, yeah, like I feel like I had a really really good childhood. I
Mm-hmm.
also like went to private school. Like I think my parents really wanted to like build a like good foundation for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know that like they both kind of came from situations that weren't like the best, and like I know we'll probably get into this later, but my on my mom's side, my grandma is from Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So like my mom growing up, it was always like do really well in school, like go to school, do this, do that, so that like I can get a good job. And it was always like those same like those typical jobs you hear of like lawyer, doctor, or like so
Yeah.
I like growing up, I was like always getting like straight A's, and like I was very like in the books. And yeah, like but I also yeah, I just feel like I had a really like privileged great like childhood up until like maybe when I was like 14.
Okay.
um but that's kind of what it was like growing up. Hope I
Okay.
touched on everything. Yeah.
You did. I am curious though, because you obviously gave us kind of like a pausing point. So what was this turning point that happened at 14? Like
Yeah.
right in the heart of teenage years beginning.
Yeah. So my parents, and I said this, like they were very much so involved, like throughout
Mm,
my whole childhood and growing up. And then I started noticing them like fighting a lot, and maybe it's because I was more aware because I was like older.
mm,
But um, they, yeah, essentially like they were arguing a lot, and they ended up separating when I was like officially separating when I was like 16, I think.
okay.
And then I mean, all in all, like there was, I would just to get, I guess, a little bit deeper in there. Like, I think I found out because one night I was like, my mom was out. She used to like go out and stay out like pretty late,
Mm,
and then my dad was home, and I heard him like on the phone like in the middle of the night, and I went over, and he was on the phone with a lady, and I was like, is he like cheating on my mom? And I didn't even like. Then I told my mom about it the next day because I was like, I like had a whole episode that night.
yeah.
And then I went and told my mom about it, and my mom like knew. And then after that, like then they knew that like I knew what was going on. So then like they didn't hold anything back and would like argue in front of me. And I heard like everything from like just maybe my dad not being like the nicest to my mom because he found out that my mom actually like had cheated on him, and like so
Okay.
it was just like this big deal. Apparently, I found out that like this whole thing started because my mom cheated, and that also led me to have a lot of resentment towards my mom. And I probably still do, but like I love my mom because she's my mom, but like
Yeah.
I definitely still, harbor some of those feelings just because it really, I don't know, it was a really like once all that the arguing happened, like I was kind of like it kind of was like going from so much of my parents' attention to so little, because then they both were like focused on just finding other people because they didn't want to be alone. So then
Right.
I was
Right.
pretty much like in the house by myself, like growing up my
Okay.
teenage years, like trying to figure it out. Like,
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of,
Wow.
it was a big change.
That's really interesting too, the way you phrase that, because it sounds like the way you were breaking that down, it went from one extreme to the other. So I was maybe the center of their universe because I was the only child and they were in a happier place, in a happier time, perhaps.
Yeah.
And then whenever the infidelity maybe initially happened with mom, then dad started pulling away, trying to, I don't know, address it in whatever way that he thought he could. And then mom started doing it in kind. And then that, because they were then really focused on themselves, then you became less of the focus at that point. And then you also knew what was going on. So then that kind of compounded maybe some resentment feelings that you said you had, particularly towards mom.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Number one, I appreciate you for sharing that, because I know a lot of us come from, not everybody obviously, but a lot of us come from environments where either things are not the way that they appear to be, because
Yeah.
sometimes parents feel like, you know, they're trying to protect their children. I'm a father, by the way. But sometimes people feel like they need to protect those that they love and not necessarily tell all the information because they feel like, you know, it's going to shatter people's images they might have. But also in your case, I think it's also pretty interesting because, like you said, you were the only child. So I'm not a big fan from like a clinical perspective. I'm not a big fan of extremes because most times people don't handle them well. If I tell you, like let's take it off of your parents for just a moment. If I said we were putting in a dating situation, right? You're going to go from the beginning, this man is in love with you, this person is in love with you, and they're all talking to you, communicating with you all the time. And then 4 months go by and now it's like pulling teeth to get information, right?
Mm-hmm.
That generally people don't appreciate that type of extreme polarity, going from one swing to the other. So I'm curious, like, again, when you were talking about that and you're saying you're being at home more on your own at that point,
Mm-hmm.
were you guys as a family having discussions, or was it literally kind of just everybody's out doing their own thing at this point?
From, you know what's crazy, like kind of a crazy thing, the brain kind of does things, but like I feel like I blocked out a lot of the memories from that time. I remember the feelings more than I remember the things that happened.
Yeah.
But did we have conversations? Yes, like of course. And like I think I also probably was, because I grew up with my parents and like I didn't have siblings, and I had my cousin who was like my sister, and like I grew up basically with her, but like other than that there was really nobody else aside from me and adults. So I think like I probably put myself in their business too much, and they probably allowed me in their business too much. And so I think like even in this situation, right, like it came to a point where like everybody wanted to be involved in my parents' relationship, and like even my grandma was like texting me things about it, like, oh, your mom did this and that. It's like, why are people telling me these things? Like, I don't want to hear this. Like,
Yeah.
And it like there was just so many things that happened throughout. And yes, there were conversations, but they always ended up getting really heated, and whether they were like emotionally abusive, sometimes honestly it got physical too. So that was obviously really difficult to see. Like and then, you know, like definitely alcohol played a factor in that too. So like there's a lot of like alcoholism that runs in my family, and like I know that like a lot of these conversations were also I don't know, maybe more heated because of the alcohol.
I can imagine so.
Yeah, but like yes, we had conversations, none of which really felt like they went anywhere. I would tell them how I felt, and a lot of times I felt like I got like the sentiment of like, get over it kind of thing, like we're moving on into other relationships, like you should be moving on too kind of thing.
Okay.
It just seemed dismissive, and like they were so like fully I guess like encompassed with what they had going on in their lives, and like the loss of their relationship and like forming new relationships, that like my feelings just were like totally like brushed aside.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is tough, but yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question. Like, yeah, we did have.
No, it does. No,
yeah.
it does. And it's one of those things, like if I was trying to speak from like a parenting perspective, anytime separation is going to happen, you know, it's going to be difficult. I have a lot of clients who co-parent. I co-parent as well. I know it's challenging for a lot of folks to sometimes learn. I think this is a particular challenge for us, when you're trying to separate the romantic relationship, let's say in this case of the parents, right? So we got different hats I usually say that we wear. So let's use you for an example. So you are an individual woman, individual person, and then in this particular context, you're a daughter, right? And then your parents, obviously, so your father is a man, he was a husband, he was a dad, or is, and mom, so she was a woman, a wife, a mom. So what I notice that happens sometimes for some of us when we're going through this initial separation period is like we forget that we have other roles that we're supposed to be playing. So maybe based on what you're saying, it sounds like they were chasing the individual role. Like I need to be fulfilled because my relationship, my romantic relationship, my partner, my spouse is degrading to the point that I don't know if we can resolve this or if we want to.
Yeah.
And because that was happening simultaneously, I'm forgetting to do the mom and dad role to Sydney. So she's kind of missing that level of not necessarily maturity, but just, I would say, honest boundaries to say, to your point about there's certain things I think it is appropriate to withhold from children, not because you're trying to lie to them, but because there's boundaries in terms of there's things you're not ready to understand. So it's probably not appropriate to be telling you these things at this age. When we get older, we can have very real and honest conversations and talk about maybe those more challenging details. But at 14, 15, and 16, like you're in the heart of trying to figure out who you are, like the beginning of it, I would say, you need a parent, who's going to try to be there for you. Granted, they have their own challenges, but I see a lot of us struggle in that area. So we end up like kind of abandoning that role. It's like, well, I'm going to go do me. I need to go figure me out. And you might be like, hey, so who's looking out for me?
Yeah.
Okay, you'll be good. You're like, I'm gonna go figure this out. I need to go get me a new person now. Yeah. And I just try to challenge parents to like really think about the impact of some of these decisions that we make, because the kids are watching. It does impact them, and it's unfortunate, that you had to go through that.
Yeah.
And even when you're talking about like you were kind of touching on my next topic in terms of how the dynamic changed. So you kind of mentioned that you had a bit more resentment towards mom during that time. And you said that some of it still kind of feels like it's there. Have you guys had any follow-up discussions like since that time about kind of why things happened the way that they did and any repair work maybe that you guys could have done?
Yeah. Yeah, I've talked to my mom plenty of times about it. I've talked to both of them plenty of times about it. My mom and I are both very emotional people. Like I think we're very similar in a lot of ways, but I always am like, it's funny because I always say like, I don't want to be like my mom, which I know sounds like fucked up. Sorry if I don't know if
okay. It's okay. You're good.
But like, I say that, but then I'm also like, I feel like I'm a lot like my mom. And, yes, we've had a lot of conversations. A lot of times it feels like, what's the like catchphrase for it? Like, I don't know, like I'm talking to a wall kind of thing, because I feel like it doesn't really get anywhere. Like she's very strong on like how she feels and how she believes and like, but then she's also like now at this point in my life, she's a lot more like apologetic. I think like she's a lot more like, I'm sorry. And she gets like really emotional when she talks about it. And like, she feels like she messed up and stuff like that. But then sometimes to me now, it's like, I don't know what it is. It might be just like, because I kind of like did a lot of like figuring things out for myself during my teen years and into my young adulthood, that like when she says like, oh, I messed up, like you're like, now you feel a certain way and you like, I don't know, it almost makes me feel like she's putting me down, because it's like, well, I like did this for like I raised myself and I think I'm doing pretty damn good. So like, don't say you like messed up. Like, I don't know, there's this like weird like, I don't know. And now my parents are both like, in situations that like I don't love for them, but like I have no control over them. And I'm now, an adult at this point. Like I'm living my life across the states. Like I live in New York now. I moved from LA. So like, now I almost feel like I'm playing like the reverse role. Like I'm like parenting my parents. Like,
okay.
They like come to me a lot with like the things that they have going on. And I'm like, oh, well, here's what I would do kind of thing. Like, it's very like interesting. Okay. I've always had a friendship relationship with my parents because it's always been so close that like, I don't know. I think there's just also another thing that I will say that I think probably, and maybe this is going totally off tangent, but like there was a huge lack of like boundaries like throughout.
Nope,
Like just
that's not off tangent at all. I was
yeah,
actually going to go there, but please continue.
huge lack of boundaries just in like really just in the relationship, like the relationship as a whole. Even like embarrassing, but like I slept with my parents for like way too long. Like just so I was old. Like there just things were just not like they loved me. Don't get
Yeah.
me wrong. Like, and I loved my parents and I loved my childhood. And I like literally, I think they did their absolute best. And
Yeah.
like now I can actually think about it in a different way. It doesn't change the fact that I'm hurt and that I have a lot of like residual behaviors and like character traits or maybe like defense mechanisms that came out of that. But like they did the best that they can. And like, yeah. I don't know where I was going. I think I answered the question.
No. I'm following you, and it's interesting. No, you kind of brought up a point that I was actually trying to get to, but let me ask you a clarifying question before we continue. Do you know about how old your parents were when they had you?
Yeah. So my mom was 20, my dad was 21. They met when they were in high school. They got together when they were 15 and 16, I think. My dad was like the quarterback. My mom was like the head cheerleader, captain of the cheer team or whatever. So they were like everybody kind of looked at my family, even just like with like all of my extended family. Everybody was coming to our house for Christmas. Everybody was coming to our house for Thanksgiving. Like we just had like the,
kind of like the centerpiece.
Yeah, I felt that way. Maybe I was just being.
No, but you're entitled to your perspective, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So dad was 20. You said mom was 19?
My dad was 21. My mom was 20.
Oh, sorry, 21, 20.
Yeah.
Dad was 21, mom was 20. Okay,
yeah.
So very close in age.
Yeah.
Okay, and then kind of building on that, because I'm going to try to go somewhere with this. So you started talking about boundaries, right? So I would say that's fairly young to be having their first child. I'm not saying young as in it was inappropriate. I just mean young as in you're very much in the beginning stages, really, of trying to determine who you are. Not that you can't date anybody, but when you have a child, it's hard to kind of like enforce boundaries when you don't really know who you are and how you want to approach parenting. Do you happen to know if you were planned?
I definitely wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that just, and again, there's no shade. We're not shaming them or anything like that.
No, yeah.
We're just more just trying to understand kind of like how we got to this point. Because again, you brought up some really good points about didn't feel like there was really boundaries. And again, you were only a child. So I usually give the example, like when you think about anything you do for the first time, right? We know in parenting, like there's no manual, nobody's really telling you how to do stuff. So every first child, in my opinion, is the experiment. I'm not saying you don't experiment with other children, but the first one has to be the experiment because you have no other frame of reference, right?
Yeah.
Like you've never done it before. So in this case, Sydney had to be the experiment. I have an older sister. My older sister was the experiment. That's just the way that it was. So I think it's important to kind of understand and establish some of the background because that might make a little bit more of an understanding of why was it hard for them to maybe establish boundaries, because we were young. We were very young ourselves. So we still needed to figure out who we were. Yeah. She was unplanned. So then we needed to figure out how we were going to manage that. And then because of those things, it kind of could make sense why we didn't have effective boundaries. Now, if you had added maybe 5 to 7 years on them, I could imagine, not going to try to prophesize here, but I could imagine they would have parented a bit differently. Yeah. Not because they would have fully known who they were, but they would have had somewhat of a better sense of who they were at that point and where they wanted their lives to go. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Do you have anything you want to add on that kind of idea of them being quite young and then not necessarily planning for you and then just the way you remember growing up with them?
Yeah. I think like times are different, right? Like from when they had me. I was born in 97. I mean, it was a little different. We're 2023. But like I'm 25 and I don't even think I'm ready to have kids. So like to imagine them having kids at 2021, like like I said, kudos to them. They did the best they can. We grew up, like I was growing up in like my grandparents' like back house till I was about 7. Or And then we moved to the front house at some point, but like, we were just living with like family, Mexicans stick together kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then like, but like I said, like my mom actually, after she had me, went and got her bachelor's degree. And then we moved to like Whittier. Then my dad and my mom bought a house, and like they really did like great things. That's what I'm saying. Like I would never try to sit here and say like they didn't try their best or they didn't do well. Like I think they did great. But you can't, sometimes things happen, life happens, life isn't fair, and like then you end up with some scars from things that happen that you can't change, that maybe you wish you could. And I know my mom wishes she could change things.
Of course. No, I mean, everybody, I think we develop wisdom through experience, and we recognize that we might do things differently. That's why I try to offer a lot of grace, especially when it comes to parents,
Yeah.
because even though we feel maybe at times that they could do better, and I agree, let me be the first one to say, my father definitely could have did a better job, but I give credit where credit's due.
Yeah.
When they do what they need to do, I'm like, hey, my dad did a great job with what he had to provide me and my sister the life that he could. So I don't take that away from a person, right? But what we are also saying is like, when a lot of people use these expressions like, I don't want to be my parents when I grow up. A lot of it is environmental. That's why I always like to start with people's environment, because that really shapes our perception of our reality. It tends to be the way we narrate our stories, at least for a while. But in addition to that, I also like to say that we can hold two truths at the same time. So I can say something like, in my case, I was like, my father did a great job overall in terms of providing the essentials, right? I can also say, from an emotional standpoint, severely lacking.
Yeah.
Severely lacking. And I can hold both of those at the same time because they're both true. And so I just encourage us to really think about the entire story. And even one thing I remember you mentioned earlier, you said that some of that you might have blocked out. Well, it's pretty common for some of us that come from like traumatic experiences, or we have some of these challenging situations that we grow up with. It's natural sometimes for the brain to compartmentalize those memories.
Yeah.
So the emotions you actually said it and described it beautifully. The emotions you don't forget, because if the memory gets re-triggered in your mind, the emotions will come right back to you, because I believe emotional pain is the one you like never forget.
Yeah.
But the memory itself, the facts, the evidence of that, you might distort or might be fuzzy. And that is typical, because sometimes that's the brain trying to protect you from experiencing that hurt again.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this is the reason why we have to have these very nuanced discussions, because no person is perfect. We all have to be looked at from a holistic perspective. There's things we might do well. There's things maybe we can improve upon. But if we're going to judge a person, if we are, which I'm not saying that we are, but if we are, look at the totality of who they are, not just one piece of them.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of speaking on that, because so you brought up your cultural background a little bit. You said you were Mexican,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So are there any aspects of what that means to you that you sort of subscribe to, or any values that you learned from your family growing up that you're like, yeah, I want to embody that more as I get older?
Yeah. So I'll say two things that really stick out to me with just like the Mexican culture in general and like growing up that way. Yeah. One is that like we are very, very, very family oriented, and like we stick together, and like we are just like when my family found out that I was moving to New York, they're like, where? Like, why? It was just a big deal. So the furthest anybody lives is like an hour from each other. So it's just like, we're very like tight knit, very close to one another. Everybody's all in everybody's business. Mm-hmm. Also, I would say that I think this stems from like on my mom's side, I think even just from my grandma, like, right, like men are just in traditional, like I think Mexican way of thinking, like men should be providers, women should just like love and care for and be like I don't know, just be caring. And I think like I grew up feeling like my value was like in a man, like I needed to find a man, I needed to be like he needed to love me, and like that was gonna be that's like the end all be all, like that's what my goal is in life, is to find a man who's gonna love me. And so I think like, and And maybe I didn't feel that way so much until like maybe the whole separation started happening. And then I felt like I needed to like run to, or I didn't realize how much I felt it until I felt like needed to start running to these like relationships that were not good for me.
Mm.
But I just needed to be with somebody because my parents were going and being with somebody. And I just like, I don't know,
Maybe trying to mirror what you saw.
likely.
Okay.
So, yeah. And I think also that just that feeling of like my value lies in somebody else and not just being myself, like has also definitely affected just like my self-esteem and like, I guess how much I think I deserve from a person and the types of things I'm willing to put up with.
Yeah.
And like it all trickles down, obviously. But
Yeah.
like my mom even makes a funny point now, right? Because she's like not with my dad anymore, and she's not seeing the guy that she was seeing for some time, which was a whole other story. That's her story though.
Mhm.
And she made a point. I lost my train of thought. I lost my train of
Well,
thought.
you were just saying that they clearly were making their own decisions about kind of pursuing their own lives. You
Yeah,
started talking about why you started trying to pursue that, and that you felt like your self-esteem was tied to pursuing a man in that
right.
way because everybody else
Oh,
was
right,
kind of
right,
doing
right.
their own thing at that point.
Yeah, and I think my mom was saying that, like, even my grandma's asking her now, like, "Oh, like, are you okay?" Like, she's always calling on her to check how she is, and it's like she's like, "I'm, like, a 40-something-year-old woman, like, why is she calling me to make sure I'm okay because I just don't have a man?" Like, and then she's like,
Mm.
"I'm sorry if I ever make you feel that way," kinda thing, and, like, I still am, like, trying to unlearn a lot of these things that I think that was impacted by my culture, like, I
Okay.
genuinely do. Um but yeah, but other than that, like, I mean, I love being Mexican. I love the food, but that's like it has nothing to do with all this.
No, but it's still these are all still important aspects, right? And I love that you brought that up.
Yeah.
I don't know if I told you, like half my family's Latino, that we're Salvadoran.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
so like I'm very big obviously on the family aspect as well, and coming from a
Yeah.
large family
Yeah.
also. We're typically very much intertwined and engaged with each other, to your
Mhm.
point. Um, and I would also agree with you. I think a lot of us are quite traditional in terms of what the gender roles look like.
Mhm.
So I agree with you 100%. You know, men typically are the ones who are out working. Not that women don't work, but they're the
Mhm.
like majority of their income, if not all their income, is for the family at large. Sometimes the extended family on top of that, and the women are typically there to take care of the children that they're usually having, right?
Yep.
Um, and I do agree with you. I think that that's slightly changing, and I'm very open minded to those things. I think it's
Mhm.
okay if somebody wants to adhere to those norms, and I think it's also okay for some people that don't. And like for
Mhm.
example, if somebody says I don't want to have children, I don't think you have to be shamed for not doing that just because majority of your family does.
Right.
Um, so it's kind of like that's why I think the cultural norms and the values, I think that they matter,
Mhm.
because sometimes it's things that we want to subscribe to. But like, yes, I love this, like the family
Mhm.
orientedness,
Yeah.
right? Yes, I love that. Give me. I want that. And then brought up food. I agree with you 100%. But then there might be other things where you're like, well, I don't want to feel like I'm less than because I'm a woman, or that's my interpretation, because
Mhm.
I'm a woman compared to being a man.
Mhm.
That I think is a fair challenge. I want to work more. I don't want us to be solely dependent on my partner's income. I want to be able to bring something to the table as well.
Mhm.
I think that's totally okay. So
Mhm.
I usually talk about promoting those discussions between partners when you're trying to, build families, to make sure that you have a similar vision, right? But again, it really depends on what you see. Even if we take a step back, when you were describing your upbringing, right? You said, my dad was going to pursue his own thing, my mom was going to pursue her own thing, and then I started pursuing my own thing. You didn't say this, I was saying this. Perhaps it's because that's what you were seeing around you. So it's like natural that we tend to mirror and imitate what we see because it is being normalized, even if it's not
Mhm.
good.
Mhm.
We tend to do that. So if I see, for example, my father, like me, if I see my father pursuing women and not being serious with any of them, right?
Mhm.
I don't know necessarily how to differentiate that. I'm looking at this person like he's the one that's telling me based on his actions what to value. So I may try to, it's not unreasonable to think I'm going to try to imitate and mirror his actions.
Hmm.
So I'm just saying that to you because I don't think that that's wild that you did the same thing. And not you had no context maybe for why you were doing it or what the possible consequences may have been because you were choosing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say like something that I even thought of like to add to all that, and I don't mean to just put a bunch of like negatives, but like I also think, and I don't know if this is a cultural thing or just
Mhm.
seeing it and maybe like you said, like modeling after or mirroring things that you saw, but like I think I also grew up in a way that like women should just be like kind all the time
Mhm.
and almost just like people pleasing.
Okay.
And
Heard.
I would say that that's still like a really big issue that I have. And like, even to the point where like, it's hard for me to say no. And you can imagine how that is like super like
Oh
detrimental just
yeah,
in so many areas. Um,
absolutely.
so I just wanted to get that out because I feel like that's also important to say.
No, 100%. I actually I work with a lot of my clients who have difficulty in that area. I just call it appropriate boundary setting. So, and a family usually is one of those really hard ones to do because you kind of feel like I'm supposed to. Some of us do. I feel like I'm supposed to be there. I feel like I'm supposed to check in. I feel like I'm supposed to do this for you because maybe that's what my culture dictates. Maybe that's how my family, the way they raised me, it kind of feels like, let me give you like a small practical example. I have a man I'm working with right now, and his father passed not too long ago, and he feels like he's supposed to step up in the way that his father did. Is that wild to imagine? No, because he's just trying to do what he believes that he's supposed to do.
Right.
But that can also come with some unforeseen consequences, to exactly your point. I don't have boundaries with any of these people who are my family and my friends because when I feel like they need me, when they say that they need me, I feel like I have to be there. So there's no sense of self-care. There's no sense of making sure that I'm fulfilling my emotional needs
Yeah.
before I go to all you guys. And you will not hear me ever echo that because that actually is an unsustainable model. What we talk about on this platform is things that we can try to replicate for a lifetime. We don't talk about stuff you can do short term because that doesn't mean it can last forever. So you're going to eventually find yourself in a similar position if you don't find another way to deal with it. So people pleasing, I think it could be a great attribute if I have a boundary to say, I like to take care of folks. I like to be quite selfless. I think that's very admirable. But if I take it like anything to the extreme, I'm becoming the sacrifice because then I'm not taking care of me. I'm living
Right.
for all of you,
Yeah.
which is really unfair.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe if you felt said or thought that you felt that way before.
100%. That's like, yeah, that's the best way to put it. And I think I even like read somewhere once, like, if you're saying no, if you're saying yes to somebody else, but you really want to say no, you're saying no to yourself. And then that,
Wait. Say that for me one more time and real slow.
wait, I have to remember it. Okay. If you say yes to somebody else, but you really want to say no, you're really saying no to yourself. So, like, that will, I mean, then you're tearing yourself down, right? Like you're not, I don't know, like that one really stuck with me because I'm like,
Absolutely.
and things can stick with you and then it could still be difficult to say no. Like I know
Yes.
the consequences. Like I'm well aware of what I'm doing to myself. I'm well aware of like how I'm going to feel after I say yes, even when I want to say no. And like, I do it anyways because I don't know how to, like, or I don't feel strong enough to, or whatever the case is. Like, I just still end up doing it, and I'm like, what am I doing?
And then maybe possibly a little bit of regret afterwards.
Oh yeah.
Or resentment.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I want to say that again because I love what you just said. Let me see if I can remember what you said. So if you're saying yes to somebody that you want to say no to, then you're actually saying no to yourself. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Remember that one. So I absolutely agree. I think that's the way the game goes. Let me give this example that I usually say, but I'm going to just say it because somebody else might not have heard it before. So usually in therapy, I just talk about this idea of emotional capacity, right? We only have a certain amount of it every day. Think of it like a cup. I don't have a cup, but I'm going to just use my bottle here. So imagine this is you. This is how much you can handle like in any given moment or any given day, right? So if I'm a really selfless person, everybody pay attention. If I'm a very selfless person, what does that typically look like? It might look like I'm going to pour this out for everybody else. And then at the end of the day, what happens with this bottle?
It is empty.
And what happens to me? There's nothing to pour in mine.
Yep.
Right? So what happens to me if I do that over and over and over and over again? I'm not well. Maybe I'm not taking care of myself. Maybe I don't eat well. Maybe I don't sleep well. Maybe I don't get outside and breathe fresh air and do some type of activity. Maybe my familial relationships, my friendships, maybe they suffer because I'm like, I have to be here for all of you. But there's a cost. The whole purpose of me making that example is there is a cost. You cannot do that for the rest of your life because, as you said, you will sacrifice you in order to achieve that. And I would ask anybody, is that worth it? Is it worth it to you, Sydney?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So that means we're going to work on that. We're going to say, no, I'm the priority. I got to focus on me. I'm worth that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Sure. Make sure we're on the same page. Excellent. Okay. So kind of following that train of thought then, right? So we talked about if we're not taking care of ourselves or if we're thinking we have to be there for everybody else, then we know there's not a lot in the tank left for us, right? Yeah. So thinking about how that's you've maybe experienced that so far in your life, right? How do you think you have approached or handled romantic relationships up until this point in your life?
Yeah. Oh man. Very, very, very poorly. Okay. I think what I will say is I think it seems like I have it all. Well, not everything. Okay. Like I'm not trying to like toot my own horn, but like, I think like it seems like I have things figured out, right? Like whatever. I went to school. I got a good job. I like moved. I have my own apartment. I have my own car. I like take care of myself. I do the whole whatever.
Being an independent adult.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Got it.
But let's talk about romantic relationships. Like,
okay, let's talk about them.
Like, oh man. So like the first relationship that I got into, I don't know how, I'll go pretty deep into this one, but this was like when my parents were like going through like the thick of it. And at this point I had to like, not had to, but my parents like really like at that point they wanted me to like meet their significant others. Now I really didn't want to, and like I feel like I was being forced to. So I just like needed somebody there with me. Like I didn't want to do it alone. And like I would just anyways, I ended up getting into a relationship with like basically the first person that like wanted to be in a relationship with me and had their own like place. I was 19 at the time. 18.
Okay.
And that just relationship, like I already grew up not having the best self-esteem and not feeling like, you know, like good enough or whatever the case was. And, you know, he just like tripled that. Like he would, you know, just make tons of comments about like my physical appearance. A lot of times it was about my weight, which he knew was like a big insecurity of mine. He would like force me to do things that I didn't want to, like a lot of things, to the point where I actually ended up like getting pregnant. I had an abortion, which I think is also important to talk about, that it's okay to do it, because not like, oh, I'm encouraging everybody to go get an abortion, but like, I do want to say that like growing up Christian, I went to private Christian school. I grew up in a like religious, so to speak, household. So that was like difficult for me thinking that one through. Cause I was like, well, like God wouldn't want me to do this. And like, this isn't the right thing to do. I spent a lot of time like praying about it because I still like have my faith, but I think to me, it's more about having faith and having a relationship with God as opposed to like being religious. And anyhow, I feel super at peace with my decision. And I still believe in God. I think he's forgiven me. And like, I don't like, a lot of times they'll kind of put that narrative out there that like, oh, you'll regret your decision and you'll feel so like sad the whole time. And granted, there are some women who do, and I'm not here to speak for every woman's experience. I'm only here to speak for my own. But I will say that like, I definitely made the right decision for me. And like, you know, but anyways, to continue that, like that relationship was really horrible. And at that point, that was kind of the turning point for me where I was like, okay, like, Sydney, seriously, like, what are you doing? I was telling myself going into that relationship how much I didn't want it to end up like my parents. I didn't want my parents' relationship. I wanted something so different. I want something that's going to last. So I stuck through anything and everything. He cheated on me so many times. Like, I stuck through everything just because I thought, like, I'm going to make this relationship work. I'm going to make it last. He loves me. And that was wrong. It wasn't until like it was a year. And it sounds like for all that to happen in a year is kind of impressive on his part. But anyways, like, it was bad. But literally, I didn't give myself any time after the relationship to heal. And I got into another relationship right away, which doesn't sound like the apple falls too far from the tree. And then I got into another relationship that was unhealthy. Not that he was like emotionally abusive in any like regard. He was like better to me, but like I had really bad, like, I think because I was cheated on so much, like I had really bad, or I was cheated on and I saw cheating in my family that I thought was so perfect. So like, this whole like thing of infidelity for me was just like, I'm going to get cheated on. It's going to happen. So I was with him for a year, the second guy. And I think we spent maybe 2 days apart. Like, we were together every single day and we didn't have our own places. So if he was staying with me, and like, because my parents weren't really home at the time, like he was staying with me in the house, or like I was staying with him and his family who was probably tired of me. Like, it was just, we didn't give each other any space. That caused a lot of problems too. Like, it just got really unhealthy. Like, we weren't even our own people at one point. Like, so that was bad. Then I finally took some time to just like breathe and figure it out and just be single and just enjoy being single. And then I got to the point where I was like really comfortable being single. But then I developed, I think in that first relationship, I developed this like mentality that I need to like hurt people before they can hurt me. And like yeah. And I also thought that I wasn't deserving of like a good love, like that I only deserved like, I don't know. Pain? I don't know what I was thinking. Say that again. Sorry.
Pain?
Yeah, pain. Yes. I didn't think I deserved anything good. And some time passed. And then I was on a dating app and I ended up meeting a guy who's actually from New York, which is part of the reason I moved to New York. And he was on vacation in LA at the time, and like he treated me so much like so much differently than all of like anybody that I had ever been with before. Like he was like a man, and I like never thought that I was good enough for that. So the fact that I was getting it, like I at first was like, oh well, he's just gonna want to hook up, and like that's that. And I was already like, I made peace with that in my mind, like, okay, well, he's just gonna like, that's it, that's all that's gonna happen. And he ended up like pursuing me even after he left, and like I flew out here to see him over here, and like I was like, wow, like this guy is like, he's great. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking he doesn't really like me. He doesn't like, there's no way that like I'm good enough for this relationship, or whatever thoughts that I was putting in my head, which led to a bunch of things that I completely regret. Not to say that he was, you know, everybody has their own flaws, right? But I'm not here to like talk crap on him because I think he was great. But like we were together for 2 years, but a lot of things happened in the relationship. A lot of like, I cheated. And he found out. He like, also not good on his part, but he like downloaded my iCloud library. It just got really like toxic. And I think we tried to make it work and like couldn't. It just no matter, like I think the trust was so broken, and there were just, you know what, actually we spoke before like all this, and you had mentioned something about like know what your like deal breakers are before you go into a relationship.
I did.
Yes. And like that resonated with me so much because I definitely knew already what some of my deal breakers were when I got into this relationship, but I like ignored them. And despite him being
Mm-hmm.
a great man, like there were some things that like I saw and I noticed that were a huge problem throughout the relationship, like being family oriented and wanting to be like part of my family and become like, become like part of my family and like be involved with my friends and stuff like that. And I felt like he didn't want to do that with me. Like he didn't want to, and he didn't want me to be involved in his life and with his friends. And like, I felt very like everything in his life was compartmentalized and I was just one chunk of it. And like, I didn't
Right.
feel included. And then, yeah, like, oh, and then also just like my faith, right? Like, I think that was also important to me. Like, even if somebody doesn't believe in God, that's fine. Like, I don't have to be with somebody who believes in God per se, but I need to be with somebody who's gonna at least like co-parent with me in a way that like it's okay. Like I don't want to confuse our kids, but like, I don't know, figure out how to make that work. I think that was also
Of
always a
course.
conversation. So, bottom line to like end this here, like I would say that like I still like love him. Like I think I do. And or not I think I do. I know I do. We fairly recently broke up. But I don't, and I think we talked about this too. Like I don't know that like if that love is enough to make the relationship last, despite how much I want it to.
Okay. Absolutely. We're going to definitely dig into that a little bit more in terms of the context of that point you just mentioned. But
Yeah.
I want to touch on some of the things. I made a couple little points while you were discussing that. So you mentioned ignoring deal breakers, right?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned hurt others before they hurt you.
Yep.
And you also mentioned in the first two relationships that you were not taking enough time in between, right? So let's break some of those down because I think that they're very important points that you're mentioning. So usually, like when and this is all my perspective. I'm not basing this off of anything other than my anecdotal experience and evidence of other people that I've worked with and that I've spoken to. But when you don't take a lot of time in between relationships, what I find is that there's not that opportunity to not only learn how to sit in your emotions and truly reflect, because hurt and pain can be good motivators to actually do something about them, to actually grow, to be better, to learn from situations. But when I jump from situation to situation, I'm kind of robbing myself of that opportunity to learn. Because number one, now I'm with you, so I didn't take the time to figure out why didn't we work. Because now I'm looking at you, I'm saying, hey, I need to learn you. I need to figure things out with you. So I'm actually not taking the opportunity to say, what was Sydney doing that helped the relationship fall apart? What was I doing that made the relationship fall apart? Let me work on addressing those concerns so that way when I'm with you now, greater chance it's going to be successful, right? Yeah. So if we're jumping, no time to do that, because a lot of times I find that we just kind of don't want to be by ourselves. So it's just like, hey, I'll take you. Right. So that's the reason why we'd want to address that. Then you mentioned hurting others before they hurt you. I think that's significant only in the context of if I'm operating from that framework, right? Then it kind of makes it seem like I'm coming into this relationship knowing maybe there's some things I need to address, but I'm not willing to address them yet. And you're going to pay the cost for it.
100%.
Because I don't have the confidence in you. Not that you did anything wrong, but because of my past hurt, I'm bringing that to the forefront in this relationship right now. Yeah. So now you have to pay the cost for that. And so it can kind of come off as being unfair because you don't actually know what to address, meaning the other person. They don't know what to address with you. They just know something's kind of off over time. And they just end up kind of becoming that learning experience for you instead of you taking that time, like we said, in between to learn, grow, then get into the healthy relationship, because I understand more or less what I'm looking for and what I need from you. And then lastly, tying that up, ignoring the deal breakers. So what are deal breakers, right? So let's explain that. In my opinion, deal breakers just mean things that you know you cannot deal with, you cannot tolerate if they're broken, right? If you know these things and you still put yourself in that position, what can that mean? I'm inherently creating a riskier probability that it's not going to work, right? If I want something to work for the long term, I cannot afford to ignore a deal breaker. I'll give you one of mine, right? Communication is the highest order to me. There's no way I can be with somebody who does not want to communicate, because 99% of the issues that I see, both personally and professionally, can be boiled down to lack of communication or miscommunication for a lot of folks. And it ends up creating this very challenging environment where we're not willing to see each other's perspective. We're not willing to listen to why you feel the way that you feel. So it just makes it easier and easier to diverge, and we're probably not going to make it.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you sharing a lot of those points, because I think the audience needs to hear those things. We all need to be reminded of those things, simply because a lot of us do them. We jump because we don't want to be lonely, right? We hurt because we're afraid of being hurt, because maybe we got hurt already. We're ignoring stuff that we know we probably shouldn't be, because maybe, again, we want somebody now. So I know that's a red flag, but I'll push it to the side right now. Maybe we can work through that later.
Right.
And a lot of cases I find that we're unsuccessful, and then the cycle can end up repeating itself.
Yep.
Anything else you want to add on that point?
Yeah. And I think also, like you mentioned, the other person ends up becoming like the learning experience. Mm-hmm. And I think also, like, I also take a lot of like guilt with that too, because I realized, like, I know I wasn't ready to be in a relationship, like with, my last relationship that I was in. And I did it anyways, because I liked him and I wanted to be with him, but I hadn't done any of the work that I needed to do. And then I think along the way, like, he ended up having to deal with the consequences of my like unhealed traumas. And like, that's not his, I mean, like, I just have a lot of guilt for that. Like, I feel bad. And I mean, yeah, like I think also, like, I've been saying this like recently just about that like relationship apart, like specifically like where I'm at now. Like, I wish I could just like start all over and like erase memories and like just do it better. But like, unfortunately, you can't. Like, that's not life. That's not how life works. But like, I'm like, damn, like, I'm sitting with this thought, like, if you could just like really, if you could take back time, like, but
that goes back to the old hindsight adage. I use the concept. I actually believe I'm going to validate what you said, but I'm going to give you a different perspective on it. I actually think the pain is good. The reason why is because I think, I'm going to speak for a lot of men that I know. I don't want to speak for women, but I will speak for a lot of men. Yeah. A lot of us, because we're not like equipped for a very long period of time to know how to be emotionally intelligent and know how to describe how we're feeling and really feel comfortable to communicate that and share that to our female partners, for those of us that are heterosexual. It causes us to have a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. And what can happen is, unfortunately, we get to the point where we have to lose that person, and then some of the ideas become clear. And then we decide and realize, hey, I need to go work on this. I need to go and get some help with this person, because I recognize that I'm ill-equipped to do it on my own. I actually think pain is a great motivator. The same way, not that I'm wishing for it, but if there's no bad, then there's no good.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't hurt at times, then you don't appreciate when you're not hurting. You don't appreciate the fact that you've learned how to cope better, that you've learned to grow with the situation, that you've learned to cultivate and create a support system to help you through difficult times, which we will all go through. Yeah. So I would say to you, I actually think it's more important that you remember those painful memories and those painful experiences, not to torture yourself, but to remember. So if you find yourself in another situation, you're like, man, I really like this person. They really seem like they're a great fit for me. I don't want to mess this up.
Yeah.
Because I remember how I used to be. I remember how I used to approach the situation. I don't want to put us in that situation. So I'm going to be better this time. Right. I'm going to do what I need to do, which is why when we mentioned a moment ago, if I take the time in between relationships to work on me, I am more complete, which means I'm more prepared to welcome you into my life. if you're doing the same thing,
Yeah.
that might be an expectation. You're ready to welcome me and us try to figure out how to blend our lives together. But we have to do that work. All that is predicated on the work got to be done. If it's not, it's going to be way harder to go through that because it's extra barriers and more hurdles that we end up having to jump over. But we're the ones that are creating them.
Right.
You get what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think like something that just stands out for me is I feel like I've been trying to do the same work. And I think also it comes down to, right, like I think, so I've had the same therapist. I go to therapy. I love therapy. I've had the same therapist for like 4 years, and she's great. Like she's helped me with like so much, honestly. Like I will say like I've grown a lot through the sessions that I've had with her. I'm not sure, and you're a therapist, so maybe you could tell me, but like I'm not sure if there comes a point where maybe you like outgrow your therapist or they've helped you to the maximum that they can, because I feel like I'm at a point where like now like there are things that I'll bring up to her that I like want support with, and I feel like I'm not getting what I need out of it. And I still know that I need, like, I still know that there's areas like, right, like I mentioned, like people pleasing. I mentioned like even just now I'm talking about the relationships, right? So I think like, or people pleasing, saying no, setting boundaries, learning that it's okay to not be nice all the time, and things like that. And then also just like taking some time with like healing from your past relationship and not just like jumping into something and like learning what you did wrong so you don't do the same things. And like there's all these areas that I feel like I haven't improved on yet, but want to and don't know like where to start.
Sure.
I mean, yeah.
Oh, I'm with you. Let's break that down. Let's break that down. And I love that you're bringing these points up. I love that you're bringing them up. A lot of my audience, from what I understand, it's a lot of men that tend to watch some women. And in therapy, a lot of my clients that are men typically are first timers, meaning they have no experience with mental health. They have no experience with therapists. So I'm kind of setting the tone for them, right? So let's break down what Sydney just said. So, and you tell me if I'm misspeaking at any point, like, please tell me, so I'll make sure I correct myself. So Sydney said, been in therapy for 4 years, same therapist, possibly getting to the point where we're not feeling like we're growing the way that we want to, or when we try to bring up an issue, we're not tackling it the way that we want to.
Right.
Good so far?
Yep.
Okay. So let's talk about like, what can you do in therapy? Can you be with the same therapist for a prolonged period of time? Yes, you can. My longest client actually, her and I recently just stopped working together, but because she's doing fantastic. And but I had 3 years with her. Always appreciative, because you get to see so much growth when you get to work with somebody that long. So nothing but respect. But you don't always get that opportunity, right? So what kind of things can happen? Naturally, like any relationship, you build comfort. You build a sense of, I would say, a sense of directness and honesty that maybe in the earlier part of the relationship is a little bit difficult to create. Not because therapists don't know how to do that, but because obviously we want to create a warm space, right? For you to be honest, for you to want to share whatever it is that you come to therapy for. Now, is it possible to get to a point where we've kind of run our course? Yes. Because every therapist is not equipped to go with you through the journey of your life. One thing that I will share with you all that one of my professors said that I always remember when I was in grad school is every therapist is not for every client, but also sometimes you only have people for a season, just like in your personal life. I may have this therapist and they may be great. I might be great for you at this moment in time with what you particularly present with. But then you get to this new point. Now we've leveled off. Now we're grounded. Now we're more stable. So we've addressed that stuff. Now you want to get to like level 2 type stuff. Maybe I can go with you there. Maybe I can't. Yeah. Right? We have to be able to have very honest discussion. So if I don't think I'm equipped to continue on this journey, I should acknowledge that. And I should say, I think it's time that we move on. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, it's not about me. It's always about you. It's always about you because you're the one that needs to help, right? So we need to be able to have those honest discussions. It's nothing to be ashamed about. It's nothing to be sad about. It's actually a beautiful thing because it means if you outgrow me or we outgrow this situation, it means, hey, I've given you all the tools that I can give you, and now it's time for you to maybe take it to another level, or just go out there and just remind yourself that you know how to handle these situations, and you don't need to see me every week or every other week or whatever our frequency is to address stuff. That's a beautiful thing. It's a great problem to have, I would say. But we always want you to feel like you can get the support that you need. So if you come in and you start saying things like, I don't know if you're challenging me, I don't know if you're giving me some of these healthy confrontations that help me really think about stuff so I can try to grow in these ways, maybe we are becoming stagnant. And it's natural. It happens, right? We get complacent. So we do have to constantly keep evaluating that. I would encourage you or anybody out there who might be in that type of situation, talk to your therapist. Make sure you let them know exactly how you feel. And if they don't feel like they can continue on that journey with you, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means you might need to be challenged in a new way. I've had some female clients who want to talk to a male therapist because they're used to dealing with a lot of women, or they're used to having female therapists. They want to hear a different perspective. They want to actually be challenged. I love that. Not because I want to challenge women, because we all need to have our thoughts challenged. We need to. That's how you allow yourself to grow and expand beyond your personal bias. Did that more or less answer the question?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay. But I always take that very seriously because, again, I get a lot of first timers. And so I like to try to set realistic expectations of how long should this go and what should you expect and what can I expect from you. But you absolutely can outgrow your therapist. It's not a bad thing. But again, I'm glad that you go to therapy. Shout out to therapy. If you need therapy, please go get started.
Thanks.
Because we promote that. All right. So we're gonna make a slight little pivot, still talking about relationships, but I'm gonna put you kind of like in a reverse role. So it's been my experience, I would say, in the last few months, and particularly the top of the year. I kind of mentioned this to you before we got started. I wanted to talk a lot more to women because I want to understand what women today are seeking from male companionship, from male partners. And obviously I'm a man, so I only know what a lot of us think, and I talk to a lot of men. I don't expect you to represent all women. I certainly don't represent all men, but the idea is to try to get more understanding and learning from one another, because I'm trying to actually become a bridge where we stop only listening to people that we already agree with, or we only listen to people who reaffirm the points that we already hold. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So with all that being said, I would like to know from your perspective, if a man was interested in Sydney, how should he approach you?
Okay, so this one I feel like I need to think about.
Okay.
But so obviously there's like a wrong way, I would say, but not like, well, hold on. See, this is why I wanted to think about it, because I don't just want to start talking.
That's okay.
Honestly, I would love to be approached like, I don't know. I think I mentioned this to you last time, but like just in a like a day-to-day environment where there'd be like the grocery store or like walking on the street. I actually like catcalling is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like if you find somebody attractive and you like stop them to say hi, like I think you're pretty, would you want to like go out sometime? Actually, I had an experience once where I went shopping. See, this is why it's just personal to me, right? Because not some girls would hate this, but
sure.
So I went shopping at a store like in Soho in New York, and like I had bought a pair of pants, and so one of the girls was helping me, but then there was like a guy at the register, and like I bought the pants, and then we had like a small conversation, him and I, and then I had to put in my information in like the tablet for my purchase. And then the next day, I was with my ex at the time. The next day, I get a text message saying like, hey, this is so-and-so from like the store. I actually like know that this might be weird, but like, I think you're really pretty. And I would love to take you out to get drinks or food sometime. And if I was single, I would have said yes. Like I would have been like, okay, yeah. Like that I just like when people go hard for me. I know that not there's a boundary to there, and I don't know how to, like, I can't like give every example in the world of like what's too hard, but
Right.
I just think like showing your interest is better than like not showing it at all. Like,
Of course.
please
Of
be
course.
forward. Like, please be like, make it known that you're interested in me. Like, I want to know that. So anyways, yes, that's kind of, but then like, right, like inevitably there are going to be times where people come up to you and like you're just not interested.
Of course.
And so, I mean, at that point, I wouldn't know how to respond to that, but like, I guess, yeah, that's, I don't know. Does that answer the question?
No, it does. And I want to acknowledge, and I want everybody else who's watching and listening to acknowledge, it's difficult for her to put this into words, right? And I'm not saying that because it's something wrong with you. It's just fundamentally hard, right? This is one of those areas of life that, number one, it's incredibly gray. Number two, and I'm going to get into this in a second for the guys, there's no rule book. What we know is when people, it's kind of like one of these situations where when you have an example of something, you almost don't know the right way to say it, but you know what the wrong way is when you see somebody do it. So we can use the example. Sydney said, if she's walking down the street in Soho or wherever you are in New York at that time, if you get catcalled, that's inappropriate. Guys, remember that. That's inappropriate. I can totally get with that, because that doesn't necessarily show full intention. That's just me kind of responding, but not in a way that's really showing you my intent to take it seriously, to take you seriously, right? But then we get to this nuanced part. We get to this huge gray cloud of, okay, so then what is the right way? So, but you brought up some good points. You should be intentional. You should make it overtly obvious that I'm into you and I would like to talk to you, right? Yeah. One thing I like that you said, because this is something I think that's particularly challenging in today's society, is you said, I wouldn't mind being approached on the street or at the grocery store or when I'm shopping. I don't hear a lot of people talking like that, but I would concur with you, because that's like the old school way of doing things.
Yeah.
And you mentioned like, using apps and stuff. I think we're missing that element, that sort of 3D element of seeing that person, talking to them, to get like a glance of their personality. And then that can be the type of thing that can persuade somebody to want to actually go out with you. Yeah. But when we're just swiping, like, you're missing that element. So we're much more superficial than when you actually get the opportunity to converse with a person, even if it's briefly. Is that a fair statement for me to say?
Yeah, 100%. I think most of my like dates and even relationships have been from apps, or like, either dating apps or like Instagram. And like, I would love for it to not be that all the time. I feel like it's so easy to slide in somebody's DMs.
Of course, like, the barrier to entry is very low.
Yeah, and like, I'm just like, I don't know. I want more effort. Like, and then how can you tell, really, right? Like, from other than unless somebody comes in your DMs saying some crazy stuff. But like, if somebody's saying like hi, they want to have a conversation, like, you don't really know what their intentions are or where they're going with it. I feel like if somebody comes up to you in the store, like, they really want to get to know you, because that takes a lot. That takes like, a lot of.
Sydney, I saw you in produce and I love the way you were handling those mangoes, and I would love to get your number, sweetheart.
Yeah.
Can we come? Can we come back here and actually put together a meal that I'll cook for you?
Yeah. And, right. Like, but to me, it just seems more like there's more of an effort.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think that's, and again, that's the tricky part, right? So let's acknowledge some things for the guys out there, because I don't want the guys to think I'm not gonna touch on how challenging it can be, right? So let's talk about relationship dynamics really quick. So we know for the most part, for heterosexual couples and people who want to pursue those types of relationships, it's typically going to be the man that's going to pursue the woman. Is that a fair statement for me to say? Most often.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason why I want to make sure we establish that sort of as the status quo is because that inherently means that obviously the man then needs to be comfortable with rejection. He has to learn to be comfortable with rejection, because as you said, he's got to be willing to put himself out there And then obviously the woman's going to decide whether she wants to entertain whatever he has to say or not. So number one, guys, if you're going to want to try to pursue somebody, you got to learn to be okay with rejection. That's number one. So then we build from there. So then if I do want to pursue somebody, so we're walking on the street, I'm at, well, you're in New York. I'm just going to throw a store out that I know. You're in Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
Because I've been to New York once and I went to a Trader Joe's there.
Love Trader Joe's.
Okay, cool. So we're in Trader Joe's. We're in produce. You're holding a pineapple. I got some oranges. I see you. I want to come up to you and I want to speak to you, right? So you're saying you feel like it would be appropriate to actually come up to you and speak to you in that direct manner, particularly because we're in an actual space where you can see me. You can kind of gauge my intent.
Yeah.
Is that also still fair?
Yep.
Okay. So then we got to be willing, if we're getting okay with the rejection, then we actually got to do the approach and try to be engaging, right? Obviously, this is different for every person. So we're not saying this is for everybody to meet with everybody, because that's not true. Like you said, everybody doesn't want to be with everybody. But the point is, if I at least do those two steps, I'm giving myself an opportunity to possibly make a connection.
Right.
Right? Okay. I think those are some bare minimum expectations that we can hold. I think that's fair. In my opinion, I believe that that's fair. Now, in terms of the approach, I think that that makes sense because, again, like we talked about, in most cases, the man's going to approach the woman. I do want to ask you, just out of curiosity, has there ever been a time where you have approached the man?
Yes, but it's because of like liquid courage. I've never just like approached a guy because I was like out somewhere, and that's a lie. That is a lie. That just came to my mind. This was like years ago though. Now that I'm older, yes, I 100% want to be, I definitely want to be pursued. I don't want to pursue the man. Like, I think maybe that's more traditional. Not everybody agrees with me, but like, I definitely want to be pursued and not the pursuee. But so yeah, there was a time I think I was like at Walmart like years ago, and I thought like one of the workers there was good looking, so I went up to him, which was pretty brave of me. I think we texted for a couple of days, but nothing ever happened. But anyways,
okay.
So yes, I have.
It's I think it's still relevant, but I think you also are at the same time, you're still making a good point that it's pretty typical that, and I get it too. Most people, if you ask them, would you want to put yourself in the vulnerable position of having to worry about being rejected? I don't know anybody that would consciously want to say, yeah, sign me up for that.
Yeah.
Right. You would say no. I want to be able to say no, because then not about pride necessarily, but maybe like my ego doesn't have to be hurt. And maybe I just like being in that position. Right. So I don't fault women for wanting that. I think that that is the way that it just historically has been. One of those things that it's just a norm culturally.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're building off that. Right. So now let's talk about so let's say you've approached this person. We're kind of following this dating scenario. So just roll with me.
Yeah.
So you've met this person, y'all met at Trader Joe's, he approached you, you liked the vibe, gave him the number, started chit-chatting, now you're starting to go on dates, right? Have you ever had an opportunity or a time where when you were going through the initial dating process that you were very clearly able to, you and them were clearly able to describe the expectations of what you wanted from that person?
Do you mind wording the question one more time?
Sure. So again, so we're sticking with this encounter of you just met this person, you're just starting to go on dates with them. So you very much still trying to learn them, they're trying to learn you, right? Has there been a time in the past where you felt like you very intentionally were able to describe what your expectations were of that person if y'all were going to continue dating, and that they were able to do that with you?
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, I already said like all my past relationships, I don't think they started the best. I don't think they ended the best either. But like, I don't think I was having the right conversations either, and understanding like, I wasn't even ready for my last relationship. So maybe I didn't even know what I wanted at that time. And like after being with him, then I was like, I know what I want, because you embody a lot of those qualities that I didn't even realize that I was looking for. So I don't think that I've had too many of those conversations, but I think it's very important to like do so. I think other than like, to be honest, maybe just like at my age, my generation, like my first thing, like the one conversation I will have is like, what are your intentions in terms of like, are you just trying to like hook up or are you
Mhm.
trying to be in a relationship? Because other
Mhm.
than that, like once it's like, oh, I'm trying to be in a relationship, like then it's like, okay, well, we're both trying to be in a relationship. We like each other. Cool. But none of those real things that need to be talked about are getting talked about. And then shit hits the fan. And it's like, well,
Okay.
why? Well, because we didn't talk about it. Um,
Okay.
well, yeah.
No, I love that answer. Number one, I love the honesty.
Yeah.
Honesty is always important. And I think that's fair. I believe I'm in the millennial generation, so I'm guessing you're Gen Z.
I'm on the cusp. It's like they said 97 is millennial and Gen Z or like right on the cusp of it. I don't know.
Okay.
I guess there
Maybe
are
you're
ways.
maybe you're the beginning of that new one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, I just say that because I think we kind of started that process, the whole situationships, that kind of deal. And I had a discussion with that on a previous episode with a young lady right around your age in Miami, and we were talking about that, how the only reason why you can even have one of those is because you actually don't talk about it. You intentionally don't talk about it. That's how you end up being in that situation, because you're literally
Yeah.
saying like, I don't want to have these discussions. I don't want to figure out
Yeah.
where we're going and what we want. I'm just, hey, in the moment, in the present, cool. You want to be with me? Great. Let's go on this journey. And one thing I like to offer to you as my guest and to the audience is a bit of experience just in terms of saying, if we want these things to last longer. So this is predicated on you want a long-term relationship. If you want a long-term relationship, possibly leading to marriage, okay? If that is an intention, maybe not right now, but we're talking about in the scope of your life, if that's something that you desire, okay? I must, capital O's, act with intention. What does that mean? That means I have to know, if I'm Sydney, I got to know, what do I need? What do I bring? I have to know these things.
Yeah.
So when you sit down with me and you're sitting down and we're at dinner now, right? So let's go back to our scenario. So now we're at dinner and we're talking. What are your intentions? Go ahead and ask me the question. We're going to do a quick little role play. Ask me the question.
Okay. Well, what are your intentions?
Well, honestly, I asked you out because I'm seriously trying to pursue somebody that I can build a life with. You know, I have most of my things in life pretty much in order the way that I want. And I think the one thing at this point that I'm really missing is I want that family. I really want to be able to have children. And so I'm looking for somebody who also wants to create that, I would say within the next 3 years.
Very, very, very intentional. Was that the point there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've never gotten a response like that, like ever.
Okay.
And
I mean, to be fair, it could be because, again, like we're in a slight different age difference. So it could be
I was
just
going to say that, yeah.
they may not be as serious. Not that there aren't young men. I don't want to, you guys think I'm not thinking about you. There's some guys in their, mid 20s, they're ready. So we're not going to, shade them and act like they don't want it. But it is pretty typical for men. Like it takes us a little bit longer because we got to make sure that we're financially stable, because a lot of us hold to traditional norms. I need to be able to provide for the most part, certainly for me, but especially if I want to invite a woman into my life so that we can build, because the foundation is going to, in a lot of cases, be built on my ability to provide that stability. Right. But please continue.
I don't wait, continue with what's it. Sorry. I don't know. Was there another question? I just think, I was just going to say, honestly, is that like, I do agree that I think it's because of the age range or like the people that I guess that I've been speaking with or talking to or getting into relationships with. The last guy I was with was the oldest guy I was with, and he was more intentional for sure. And that was something that I would tell him all the time, is that you're so intentional. Despite even like at the beginning, we didn't really have that conversation.
Yeah.
We talked about things that like our values and stuff like that. We had important conversations, but there was never like I don't know, you had a very formalized like sentence where it's like I want this, I want it in this amount of time
Right.
preferably, and this is exactly what I'm looking for. Like, does that
Right.
align with you or not? Like for me, for the way that I've been dating, it's like almost like a guessing game, and it's like, well, these things seem to fit together, they seem to be fine, but
Mm.
like we don't know. Let's test it out and let's see. Um, and I think that is the point of dating, but I also think like we should be more mindful of people's time. And like if we're dating, like let's be exactly like you said,
Can I
like
ask,
if
can I ask you to say that part one more time?
oh God, what did I say?
Being mindful
um
of time.
oh, we should be more mindful of people's time when we're dating, and be intentional about what we're saying and
Mm.
what we want. Um because if you're dating, like you said, if you're dating to, I'm so sorry, if you're
Okay.
dating to be in a relationship, or in a long-term relationship, in a marriage, and eventually have kids, like you should, I mean, like why waste time just dating to get to know a person and not be asking those important questions if you already know the answers in your head? Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, it absolutely does.
yeah,
I need to echo what you just said, Sydney, because
yeah, please
you
do.
make perfect sense to me. Sydney said, do not waste people's time by being mindful of people's time. And that goes both ways, right? I need to be mindful of your time. I hope you're going to be mindful of my time. I follow the mantra that I usually say on the show. I give what I get, what I hope to get. So I try to manage my expectations from there. So if I want something, I'm going to lead by giving that. If I want respect, I'm going to give respect. If I want
Yeah,
love, I'm going to give love. If I want you to be mindful of me and my feelings and my thoughts, then I'm going to certainly offer that first, because then it helps me to kind of want to hold you accountable, right? So you mentioned something there, and I like this because that's why we were kind of talking about situationships a moment ago. You said it's kind of like a guessing game. I said when you're dating younger people right now, because when you're not necessarily sure,
yeah.
it's a guessing game, right? Well, why are we guessing? Because we're not talking about it.
Mm-hmm,
We're left with no other option
mm-hmm.
but to guess or assume, which both of them can equally be wrong. We can be 100% wrong, and yet we just kind of go through the motion, right? So let's kind of break down some of those ideas. I haven't really done this on the show before, but I think that this is a good way to kind of handle this.
Yeah,
So I think there's kind of levels to relationships, and let's be real. When we're younger, I don't necessarily think that every person, when you're 19, 20, 21, 22, that you have to operate with the I'm trying to get married yesterday. Now,
right.
if you do, nothing but respect. But I wouldn't necessarily hold everybody to that standard, right?
Mm-hmm,
All I would say is this: if we want to be taken seriously, this is for men and women. I believe this is true. You tell me if you think that this is wrong. If we want to be taken seriously, we want things to be taken seriously, then we must act with intention. What can that look like? If I'm a traditional man, I'm probably going to focus on building my career, making sure I can provide that stability, because usually women see that as a plus, as a pro. They
mm-hmm.
want to know that you have your ish together, so
Yeah,
that way they can feel confident that they can bet on you. Not because a woman is incapable, not because she can't have her own job or she can't have education. That's not what I'm
yep,
saying. But she needs to know that she can depend on you.
yep.
That's an aspect, that's an important attribute for women. Men, it's not the same. We don't typically look at you ladies and think, I need her to provide. That's what a role, that's where the roles are different.
Mm-hmm.
We look at you all for different things than you look for in us.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
yeah.
So it's the attributes and the aspects of what we're going to look for are going to look different. But let's go back to the relationship aspect. So there's going to be levels to it. So maybe I'm just casually dating. Maybe I'm getting myself in situationships because I'm like, you know what? I'm young. I'm in school. I'm not really ready yet. Trying to figure myself out. No problem. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm managing my expectations. But as soon as we start talking about relationship, long-term, serious, committed relationship, right? That's where the narrative's got to shift.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, you
Mm-hmm.
are going to want to look for different things from me to be able to provide. And I'm going to want certain things from you.
Mm-hmm.
Part of what I would say is a part of that initial dating and courtship process, we're actually going to be talking about those things.
Mm-hmm.
What do I need from a partner, hypothetically? What do you need from that partner, hypothetically? And laying our cards on the table. These are the things that I know I cannot deal with. Like I mentioned the deal breakers earlier, mine's communication. You might have a different one. I need to be able to articulate and express those things because we won't just figure it out on our own. Or if we do, it's going to take a ridiculous amount of time that you may not even get. What's the more practical way? Share it. If you need something, share it. If something bothers you, mention it. If this is a concern that you don't think you can't overcome, then talk about it.
Right.
And the same for me. Do you think that that's fair?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we go back to the dating scenario. So we want to take it seriously, right? So we're saying we're going to talk it through. We're going to be honest. We're going to be real. I'm going to do my due diligence. I'm going to lay my cards on the table, the things that I know that I need, the things that I know I can't deal with, and what I'm hoping for, right? Then you're going to do the same. So let's continue on with that by first asking you a follow-up question. In your experience so far, I know you kind of mentioned already, but I just want to be clear. You haven't had a situation where a man's really sat you down that you've wanted to pursue and talk to you in that manner. Is that correct?
Not that I can remember, no.
Okay. And again, there's no shade. It's just to understand, right?
Yeah.
I challenge us as men to work on our emotional communication because women, quite frankly, are quite better at it than us. But I believe a lot of it is because women are always taught that it is okay and it is appropriate to learn how to communicate. And for us, we're fundamentally not taught that it's okay. So it's not that we're not emotional or we don't want to talk about stuff. It's just like, if you ever ask somebody to do something that they've never been trained on how to do, you're going to be afraid of it. You're going to be uncomfortable. So that's usually how I frame it for guys out there, and myself included. It took me a really long time to learn how to do that. So in thinking about that and then evolving the conversation for where we want the relationship to go, let me ask you this important question, because I think that this is great for us in the audience to learn. What do you think, just for Sydney, are some of the most important characteristics to create a long-lasting and long-term relationship?
Like empathy.
Okay.
I think just, from my experiences, I think that if there was more of that, then things might have been able to be like talked about more and understood more. And I think also like patience, because everybody comes with their own baggage, their own life experiences, and there are things that you're going to have to deal with, like with everybody, no matter what relationship you're in. You can jump from one to another, and regardless, you're going to find things that hurdles that you have to overcome, obstacles. So just being patient with that person. And maybe, I don't know if this would be a characteristic, but I would say like, I don't know. We keep talking a lot about intention. So I feel like if you're an intentional person, then I think also that would help the relationship go a long way. Because if you're intentional about all the ways that you're feeling, like you wouldn't have to prolong things that maybe don't need to go on any further, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does.
I think that's those are my thoughts.
Okay. No, I love them. I mean, especially the last one. Obviously, we've been doing our whole role play trying to talk about intention. I think it's extremely important, especially to your last point. We wouldn't drag things out that otherwise probably should stop.
Yeah.
Or, to give a slight counter, there may be situations where it could work. Maybe we're in the relationship already. It could work out, but I feel like I need to leave instead of learning how to work through that and navigate hardship.
Yeah.
I usually use the term troubleshooting, like, because most of us have computers, we have smartphones. We understand the concept of troubleshooting. Your device doesn't work. You got to do some stuff to figure it out, right? Sometimes you got to get some outside assistance, maybe tech support, something like that. Relationships are no different. That's why therapists exist. That's why I exist. We exist.
Yeah.
Because Sometimes you may find a situation that you're not equipped to handle at that particular moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. That's not something to be ashamed of. It means go get help.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know how to change a tire, what do? Go call your roadside assistance. Go call AAA. Get some help.
Right.
So it would be no different. So if I'm being intentional and I'm understanding, hey, we're hitting this roadblock, and I don't know if we can overcome it, but I do want to at least make sure we're both doing our due diligence to see if we can. And then if we can't, we put in the effort and we realize we can't. And so we feel better about walking away because I know that I gave my best.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You talked about patience. I 1,000% agree. A lot of us are quite impatient. That's actually, not to go on a tangent, but that's actually something that I really worry about these generations coming. It's almost like night and day to me. I'll give you a small example of how different like somebody like myself is. Not necessarily you, but your generation, the people that are after you.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that the way we consume content, right? This show, this is long form, right? We're at an hour and a half in. How many people are going to initially listen to something that long? Not that many. From the younger generation, not immediately. What do you have to do? You got to give them a little teaser.
Yeah.
Then you got to give them a smaller piece. Then maybe a bigger piece. Then eventually, if they like all that, they want the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's very different. My generation, we had to grow up with advertising, commercials. You had to wait for stuff. So you naturally learned how to be patient because you didn't have an option. But this generation, I have an 11-year-old. This generation, give it to me now. I want it now. Deliver it yesterday. Right? We live in the Amazon Prime era. So I don't have to wait for stuff. And what I would submit to you, what I would submit to the audience is I actually worry for the younger generation, not all of them. Some of them are really, really great people, but that many of them are getting this impression that everything should kind of be on your terms and it should happen now and it shouldn't take that long. And I don't need to be patient because you need to just figure it out. And I think that can be very detrimental to creating long-term relationships because, as you said, patience is absolutely vital. Sometimes I might need to take some time to formulate what I want to say, to figure out how I want to approach you. And if I'm sitting here like, we need to talk about it all right now, and if we don't deal within 15 seconds, I'm out of here. That's not going to create a healthy relationship dynamic. That's like a pressure cooker, you know? So that's one of these things that, like, the reason why I even got into making this show and talking to wonderful people like you and trying to learn is because we need to learn. And I think that's something that we need to slow down a little bit on and really try to engage with each other. I understand content's content. That's cool. But we need to understand, like, humans are complicated, which means it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of energy to explain all these things. So you've got to give each other space for that, which goes back to your concept about empathy. I got to be willing to try to see it from your vantage point. I'm not Sydney. I'm not a Mexican woman. I don't have that lived experience, but let me give her the space to speak to her shared experience. So maybe I can try to understand how she got here, why she sees things the way that she does, and how ultimately we can try to find a way to come together if we're trying to build a relationship. And I would hope that you would want to do the same for me.
Yeah.
That to me is empathy. Trying to get outside of my own already held viewpoint, my own implicit bias, and trying to hear you and then trying to envision what life must be like for you for whatever topic that we're discussing.
Exactly.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I think the reason I bring these three up is because I to be honest, I think I take a lot from the last relationship just because it's my most recent and it was my first, like, I would say, like, adult relationship. Yeah. But I think I was pretty empathetic. Like, I was pretty good about, like, I can put myself in your shoes. I can understand where you're coming from. I can understand maybe why you're doing things a certain way. Doesn't change the fact that things would upset me and things would make me, or things would hurt my feelings. Even if I could maybe understand where you're coming from, it still hurts me. But then I think I also lacked a lot in like, or I was more empathetic. He lacked in empathy or like emotional, like awareness kind of thing. And I was less patient. And he maybe was more patient, but I was very impatient when it came to like finding resolve. I am the type of person that like, when there's an issue going on, we get into an argument, like I want to solve it then and there. Like I want to figure it out. I want to work through it. Like I want us to get through it. But I think that might be just a like trauma response to feeling like I'm going to be abandoned or he's going to leave me if I left without resolving the situation right away. So I think like we have to talk it out. We have to be good before like we get off the phone or before I leave your apartment or before whatever the case is, right? Like we have to be fine.
Yeah.
Which I think can manifest itself as impatience and not like giving the person space or giving the person time to think, or like, because I am immediately getting drawn back to like, if I give you time to think or if I give you time to make up your mind, there's a chance that like you would leave me. And I think if I'm still talking to you, I can control the situation and like,
okay.
And then like we'll be okay, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, and then the last one, intention, I just think like that's just really important, especially now where I'm at now. Like there's no way that like you could have a healthy relationship that's not a situationship without being intentional and communicating often and like, yeah.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
You definitely preaching to the choir, ma'am. I'm right here with you. I mean, I think even that last part, you were touching on in the previous relationship. I think when you talked about the patience of feeling like you have to repair things in that moment, right? I've given that example before, and I've said I think people kind of fall into two camps when it comes to like, let's say, problem solving. Some people like me, I'm good on my feet. I use the term freestyling because it's kind of, I'm a big hip hop head. It's like thinking that if a situation comes up, I can more likely formulate my thoughts and my opinions in real time. And I like to think out loud. So we could probably engage in the discussion right here and now. Right.
Yeah.
But I also learned and understand that everybody is not like that. I think other people fall into the other camp where they need some time to kind of sit and ponder things to really try to formulate how do they actually feel about it. And then you come back together to have a productive discussion about, this is how I felt. Okay, this is how you felt. How can we actually find a meeting of the minds and resolve this issue if possible so that we can move forward? But if my expectation is that you operate the way that I think, so you better talk this through right now, but you are not that kind of person, we're just setting ourselves up for friction.
Yeah.
Because I'm impressing my expectation on you, which is not fair. I have to respect you handle situations this way and I handle them this way. And let's be flexible and understanding of each other. So that way, ultimately, we still address the issue. That's the core of it. But the way we go about it, we allow each other kind of the autonomy to deal with it the way that we need to.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep. And I think I've been kind of bad at that, to be honest.
That's okay. But that's okay. Listen, acknowledgement is huge.
Yeah.
I respect people who own their flaws. I am not a perfect person. A lot of these things I've learned through making mistakes. Some of it I've learned from vicariously from other folks who have shared with me. But I've definitely made my fair share of decisions that I think I would do differently if I had the opportunity. So none of us are, impervious to making a poor decision. So I don't want you to feel bad about any of it. I think the beauty of us talking about these things is so many others can learn, and maybe they don't have to make those choices that we did.
Yeah.
Now, and again, continuing talking about where we're at right now, I want to throw this scenario out to you because I've been thinking about this over the past couple of weeks, and I just wanted to hear your insight or your perspective on it. Do you think there is a particular situation or circumstance that you might find yourself in? Like, let's say if you were dating somebody that you might think, you know what, if this happens, if X happens, I got to go. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to work it through with you. I just got to leave. Do you have any scenario like that you could share with us?
Yes. But I will say that these are scenarios that because remember we talked about me struggling with actually sticking to my boundaries and sticking with what are deal breakers for me. Yep. I would say honestly, being physically abusive, right? Like I don't, at the moment that you put your hands on me, like I should be out the door.
Fair.
And so cheating is a tricky one for me.
Okay.
Because I would say that yes, it's a deal breaker if you show that you're not gonna. I think, to be honest, like, well, I mean, it's hard because like I think once the trust is broken, it's like then you're always like on edge, and you think that that person is constantly doing something when they're out, and you know you can't trust them. But like, part of me wants to say, like, I guess maybe if something happened and they had some sort of, like, I don't know if I would leave right away. And I don't know if that's bad.
I don't think it's bad necessarily. Can I ask you a question before you continue to
Yeah.
kind of follow up on that? How would you define cheating?
See, so my thought is like, okay, let's say you like kiss somebody else. That to me is like rough to get over, but I think you could get over it. I think you could move past that. Sleeping with somebody else is kind of like up in the air, right? It depends on the relationship. Some people I think can move past it. I think others can't. Do I think that I can? Maybe, because I think I don't know. I think I think I've been in situations where this has happened, and I have stood in it. So I don't want to sound like hypocritical and say that like I would leave if I know deep down that I probably wouldn't right away, and it would take me time. I'm also the kind of person that like I like to see things through for as long as I can, and sometimes to a fault. But like I don't know. I try not to think like, oh, once I'm with somebody, like I don't want there to be these things where it's like I'm just gonna walk out on you and there's like a, like, I want to work on things. I want to try to make
Right.
things work. Like I would love to. And I don't want to think like I've already invested time and energy into this person and I love this person. So like let's see if we can make this work. But there are certain things, right, where you can't just sit and take anything. How much will you take? And everybody has like a certain like limit and like a threshold to like how much you're willing to take. And like to be honest, I feel like I can't even really speak to that unless like I'm in the situation, because I think everything, there's circumstances for everything, and so I think like it's also very circumstantial.
Sure.
But yeah, I hope that kind of vaguely like answers the question.
No. That's pretty good detail. Let's make sure I captured a lot of it, and see if there's anything else that we can extract from that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned physical abuse. I think that's pretty straightforward. Men, we shouldn't be putting our hands on women. Women, we shouldn't be putting hands on men.
Yeah.
You said cheating. Obviously, I asked you to define that because I think people have different definitions. And also men and women, I think, look at it differently. Because I think, and again, I know we're going to make some generalizations. I'm not saying this applies to every single person, but I think for a lot of us, these things can be true. I think for men, in the physical sense, the physical connection, that's probably the most typical way that we may cheat on a woman. But I don't think it's necessarily because we have emotional connections, unlike women in a lot of cases, where if women tend to engage in that type of actions, it is emotional connection. That's why they're allowing themselves to do it. Versus for men, it can very much be, I did it, I'm moving on, I'm back with my lady, I'm not even thinking about that person, it just happened. So I think, again, there's nuance. So we might look at them differently. So I can totally respect that you might not necessarily put as much weight on it and might say, I am willing to work on it. It just depends on what happened. And let's see maybe how he responds due to it.
Do you think that women can also feel that way? Like, let's say like,
about what?
Because you say like, typically men, it's like they can be physical and it doesn't mean anything, and like women, it's typically emotional. Typically means more if you're physical with somebody. Like what if it doesn't? Like are there certain, do you believe that there are like certain cases in which it's not emotional and women can get over it the same way, or do you think like men and women are just like wired differently?
I think it could be possible for some. But if I had to like extrapolate it on a like a macro level scale, I would say I think more often than not, more women would not choose willingly, would not choose to be promiscuous. They would choose to be with intimate, like only with their partner. When we say intimate, it could be kissing, holding hands, talking about your deepest, darkest secrets, or your hopes, your dreams, including sex, I think more often than not, and again, you can clarify if you would like to, I think more women would prefer to have that partner and be with that partner as opposed to for an extended period of time, like months and months, even years, have a relationship, can sleep with somebody else and not let it affect their relationship with their guy. You can tell me if you feel differently.
No, I agree with you. But so you think that there are men who cheat and it's purely physical and it doesn't affect the love that they have for their significant other, and it's literally just physical?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of cases. I'm not saying every person, but I have seen many cases where a man doesn't necessarily hold that woman, and this might be hard to hear for some people, but I don't think that man holds that woman in the highest regard. And I think we can say that because we can go back to situationships, right? That conversation. Because when we're being intentional, if a man's being intentional and he's telling you, hey, I really want you, I really want to build a family with you, I want that. He's not typically saying that to a bunch of people. I'm not saying no man says that, right? There's con artists out there who, that's their finesse game.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say that doesn't happen, but I'm saying we're talking about the vast majority. Most men are not con artists. They're not going to keep saying that statement over and over again, because when we get emotionally invested, in my experience, it takes a lot. Not because it takes less for women, but because men are so like far behind emotionally. When we finally get up the courage and the intention to want to share that, like, we're not just doing that for anybody. When we say that to you, we're probably not saying that to this other person over here. So they have a different role, and their role is not conflated with your role, if that makes sense. Their role may be like they're just providing physical pleasure for that particular moment in time, but they don't want to necessarily build a family with them. They don't want them to have their last name. They don't want to have children with them. They don't want to provide a home for them. They don't want to give them access to their retirement accounts. They don't want to put them on the life insurance policy. So there's things that when you look at it, like, men and women may carry ourselves differently because the expectations are different. Women holding themselves true and not getting involved with the man in that way, I think it looks different from a man's perspective, because for a man to be physically intimate with a woman does not necessarily require emotional connection. It can seemingly be mindless. And again, that might be hard for some ladies to hear, but it can be mindless. It's literally just for that physical intimate moment, and that's it. Versus to sit down and have your lady know the things about you that nobody else knows, to talk about the real hopes and dreams for the future, and to build and structure the family the way you two want to do. Not advocating infidelity, to be clear, but it just looks different because expectations are different, because men and women are different. But ultimately, these things would need to be discussed, right? We would need to want to talk these things through to understand, how do you feel about these things? This is how I feel about these things, and try to find a meeting of the minds, right? Everything's about compromise when it comes to relationships. So hopefully that kind of built on what you were saying.
It does, yeah.
And also, I love the question that you asked, because I think that that's also really important. You said, how much will you take? I think it's a beautiful question, because if you think about it, why would I leave? Because maybe I'm hitting my breaking point, because you were and you did have an infidelity moment with somebody, and I don't have a history with that, so I don't know if I can override it. I don't know if I can overcome it, right? I do believe it is possible, not always going to happen, but it is possible to repair damage. I do believe it is possible, but it depends on both parties. Let me paint a scenario so hopefully you and the audience can all understand. So let's say, again, we'll just use me and you for the example. So we're in a relationship. I cheat on you, right? One time. And I know that person didn't mean anything significant to me. I very much still want my family. I just saw that opportunity, whatever. I initiated, they initiated, doesn't matter. It happened, but I have zero intention on pursuing them. It was just for that moment, right? So you were wronged. To me, from a clinical standpoint, my first thought would be, so Sydney's going to be driving the conversation in terms of what does she need to see, to hear, to eventually feel, that confidence is being restored. Because when I talk about trust, I talk about confidence. To me, trust is just confidence. I have the confidence that when you say this, that you're doing it. That when you say you're here, you're actually there. To me, trust is just confidence.
Yeah.
So you can build confidence. But what that means is, so Sydney's then setting the terms. This is what I need to see. This is what I need to feel. This is what I need to hear. And you got to be consistent. And it might take a really long time. And you got to be down for that journey, meaning me.
Yeah.
I have to sign up for that. Say, you know what?
Right.
I want you. I want this. I made that mistake. And if you need me to do these things, I will do them. And then you might say, okay, sounds good, but talk is cheap. Show me. And then for however long that period of time is where I'm working on it, maybe I'm going to therapy, maybe you're going to therapy, maybe we're going to therapy together. We start working through it time after time after time. I do believe over time, if I'm being consistent, eventually it's never going to wipe it away, to be clear. We talked about pain. I think pain is painful memories are helpful to force us to grow, like I said earlier. But can I be consistent enough that you start to find confidence in what I say again? I think, yes, it is possible.
Yeah.
Does that example make sense?
Yeah. And I honestly, I agree with it.
Okay. So for those out there, like, hopefully that is a useful example that you might think about. So the purpose is not to sell you on infidelity and everything can be repaired. No, the point is you got to have really honest discussions. You got to be real. This happened because, try not to go too deep into a role play, but I love role playing. But it's kind of like, so I didn't feel desired. That could be an example. I didn't feel desired by you. We've been together for 2 years, and I just, I kind of noticed over the last few months, it felt like you didn't really want to be close to me. If I tried to hold your hand, you kind of pulled away. I always had to initiate sexual contact, and oftentimes it felt like you were pulling away and you didn't really want to engage with me. And honestly, this girl that I met, like, she just gave me some attention, and I think I was just responding to it because I was feeling kind of malnourished, so to speak, from you. And I'm not trying to blame you. I'm just trying to give you insight. Like, this is what I think led to me making that decision.
I think that's a very real scenario. I think that like happens all the time. I honestly think that that's what happened with me. But I mean, yeah. And like I said, I guess another like question that I kind of want to pose to you is like,
sure.
And then with the other person, right? The other party, the person who got cheated on, like, what are some realistic expectations to set on the person who cheated? Like, how do you, because, right, like I know everybody's answers are going to be different because it would vary from person to person, but what do you think like makes sense, I guess?
For the expectations that the person who did the cheating should think they're going to be held to moving forward?
Yeah. Or like, yeah. What are fair expectations of the person who was cheated on to have, kind of?
Okay. I mean, I think if you're the one that did the wrong, to me, you want the relationship. This is the key part. Okay. You still got to want the relationship.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The whole example was predicated on that idea. Because if you don't want to be there, then you have no leverage. So the relationship is pretty much done.
Yeah.
But I did it. I still want you. I still want us. I still want what we've built.
Yeah.
Right. I'm at the mercy of you in the sense of what you feel that you need to see from me for an extended period of time. Extended period of time could be years, guys, ladies. It could be years. I have to be willing to write that because I'm the one that violated it. So I can't look at you and say, damn, Sydney, that's so long. I can say that, like, that's my initial reaction, but I also have to be like, you know what? But she didn't ask to be put in this situation. He didn't ask to be put in this situation. So I got to consider, we talked about empathy. I got to consider how that made them feel.
Right.
And they got to work on their stuff now. So I definitely got to work on me to help uplift and support them so that they can at some point find the confidence and the trust in me again. Right. So I think you're at the mercy of that person in terms of if they're acting in good faith to have these types of discussions. Good faith meaning I'm not trying to control your life now and say you got to do this, 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 and this, and if you don't do it, like I'm gonna walk away every day, because that's just gonna create like a environment and culture of fear and like paranoia.
Right.
That's not healthy. But again, a good faith would be, so I think, to give an example, I think you need to go to therapy. Why? Because clearly something is missing and was missing from your perspective in our relationship, but you didn't tell me. And I can't address anything if you don't tell me what the issue is. I'm not a mind reader. So if you don't find a way to learn how to express yourself, there's no way we can make this work, because I'm going to just be grasping at straws. And then you can't really tell me if it's right or wrong, because you don't take the time to learn to express what you need and how you think. You have to be willing to do that. So that to me would be my starting point. And then maybe we get to the point where we say, hey, the other person, they might decide to do some therapy too, to try to figure out and process how they are receiving all of that information. How are their feelings now, knowing that that trust was violated, right? And then hopefully building us up to the point where we're both now working together with a professional. Ideally, if you're working with the same person, I think that's great, because then, you know, the flow of information will just be much smoother.
Right.
But then you have the opportunity to actually, okay, let's come together. Let's have this meeting of the minds and start learning healthier communication, being more emotionally vulnerable and available to one another. Sometimes that's why people, you know, look outside the relationship, because again, we kind of feel like we're missing something. So it is nuanced, like you said. It's not always very cut and dry. You can't say, oh, if you do this and that's it, because that's just kind of like dangling this carrot in front of this person and making them feel like if they ever make a misstep, you know, hey, that's it. You can feel that way, but then that's almost like holding the person hostage, and that's not an honest relationship. That's not acting in good faith. So I think it's always going to come down to each person being very transparent about what they need. The person who was wronged gets to set the pace, right? Because we're talking about feelings. To develop confidence is a feeling. It's not going to happen quickly, and I won't know when you feel confident in me until you tell me. There might be some signs like, oh, I went to the store and she used to have me check in with her every time I left the house, and now she doesn't care. Maybe she's feeling more confident in me. Okay. But we should still be having lots of conversations. I would say at least once a week, to really dive into the weeds about how each other feels, to make sure that we're being as clear as we can, that I really want to be here and I'm willing to do what is necessary to make you and help you develop that confidence in me again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that answers the question.
Very long-winded answer, but it takes breaking it down, you know, in that way to really, because it's a very touchy subject and it's a very difficult subject for a lot of folks that many of us go through to figure out how to deal with.
And like I said, and like you said, I think it varies from relationship to relationship. But I think you putting it like it's really at the discretion of that person, bottom line. Like, oh yeah, like there's no,
if they even want to give you the chance.
Right, exactly.
Like we said, the question was, you know, it might be a thing where you're like, hey, I won't give you a chance. We're walking away now.
Right.
My whole point was not that that's wrong, because, you know, we're allowed to feel that way. My whole point was just that sometimes we're walking away from situations that we don't necessarily have to.
Yeah.
If we communicated more, there's a greater opportunity for us to get on the same page and right and remedy that issue.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to keep being present, but the fact that we keep avoiding and not talking about it because we're uncomfortable or whatever, then it kind of holds power over us. It's like the boogeyman in the closet. We won't talk about it, so then we never deal with it. So then we keep dealing with all the consequences of not talking about it. So but very good way for you to break that down. I think that was very well said. And I think ultimately that will be good for us to be considerate of, for those of us out there that have either been in that situation or we're concerned about being in that situation. I think you have to be at the mercy of that person who was wrong. They're going to set the tone. And if we want them and we want that situation, we got to be willing to do the work.
Right.
But I love the way we talked about that. So that was good. And we're actually towards the end of the conversation. So to get on a slightly happier note, I always like to end by talking about things that my guest, sees for themselves, wants for themselves, for the future. And you can answer that either personally, professionally, however you want to say that. But what are some of the things that you're looking forward to in your future?
I think since we're on the topic of like relationships and everything, I definitely am looking forward to like finding my person and like, I want a family. I want kids. Like I was the only child. I definitely want more than one. So I feel like I'm like at an age still where I have some time to really like grow myself. And like I think be more picky than I have been. And I'm very much excited for that. I think also I think I'll stick with that.
Okay. So maybe I might add a slight suggestion. Instead of picky, we'll say intentional.
Yes. There you go. Good.
We're being very intentional with what we're looking for and what this person is going to make sure they share with us. Right?
That's right. Yeah, no, picky had a little bit of a negative connotation. I didn't mean for it to sound that way.
No, it's okay. No, I only say it because people men and women, I hear them use those words, and like people don't like apparently when they hear that word.
Yeah.
But I get the essence of it. That's why I try to provide a suggestion.
Yeah.
No, I love that, particularly when you're talking about relationship building, right? Let me ask you kind of a slight follow-up question to that concept, because this is also an important concept. I think that this is more unique to women that I think men, we don't necessarily go through. Do you have a timeline or an idea, number one, when you think you would like to be married? And number two, when do you think you'd like to start having children?
I would love, honestly, I think just coming from the background that I do, I would love a traditional love story where like you meet somebody, you date for, honestly, I don't feel like this is where I'm like, if I meet somebody and they check off all my boxes and we've been together for 2 years, like I think you can know that that's your person.
Okay.
And so I think like I would love to date, get married at like 29, 30 and have kids right away.
Okay.
So
immediate turnaround.
Immediate turnaround. I feel like that sounds realistic to me, but also I don't know, because I think right now that's why I'm like I want to spend my time prior to rushing into another relationship. Maybe spend the rest of because this year I turned 26, so I'm like okay. So maybe spend my 26th year of life traveling, exploring, doing what I love to do, learning me, and like learning that it's okay to say no, learning to set boundaries, working on all the things I know I need to work on, which is going to be a constant thing because obviously like we're continuously healing and there's continuously new things that cause us traumas that bring up new things. It's like we're never going to be perfect, but like tackling the things that I know that I can, doing the things that I know that I want to do and not waiting around for somebody else to make that happen for me, just doing it for myself. And I think like this is going back to the way I was raised too, but like on God's timing, when it's right, like it's gonna be right. And I'm like confident that I'll find that person and I'll have, maybe it won't be exactly how I pictured, but I'm hopeful.
No, that's awesome. I mean, and I like the way you phrased that too, in terms of taking that time for yourself and really being patient, doing that inner work. So that way you feel like you'll be ready for that person, to kind of present themselves.
Yeah.
I kind of think of those situations as like opportunities. So the opportunities can be around us. They can be around you right now, but you may be not ready for it. Yeah. And so you might need to be doing that inner work to make sure you understand what your boundaries are, what your deal breakers are, what do you need? And then being able to express and articulate that to somebody that you want to take seriously. So that way you're putting yourself in the best position to actually get what you want. Right. So to me, like, that's a really important aspect to think about. The reason why I asked you about like the ages is because that's something that I've learned from women in recent years, talking to a lot of ladies, is that's something that, you know, women will fundamentally have a different worldview on than men, because we don't have the biological pressure.
Right.
So it's kind of like, I want to kind of make this point. I want to see how you feel about it for the ladies who might be listening and watching. To me, it's kind of like, I understand a little bit better now why women typically do the pressuring for marriage, because it makes sense. If a man can have children, like maybe me, can have children until like my upper 60s, 70s, possibly, because obviously as long as you have sperm production, you're pretty much good to go.
Yeah.
I have much more time. And for women out there, we know that obviously we don't have to get into all the details, but women are losing eggs every month. And so the opportunities to become pregnant are slowly decreasing more and more over time. So we know historically, that's why a lot of women obviously started having children at younger ages, meaning like, you know, maybe 18, 19, 20 back in the day, and getting married around the same time, actually kind of like your parents did. So it's not like we don't understand where that comes from, but it's interesting now because now we're being a lot more patient. I hear a lot more about women being career focused, career oriented. And so, which I'm totally in support of. But what I do say is this, and I hope all young women out there might listen to this part. And if you think I'm wrong, feel free to tell me right after. What I would challenge young ladies to think about is, if you're very career oriented, if you're very career focused, okay? If you know in the future you would like to be married, you would like to have children, you would like to create a family, right? I would recommend, particularly while you're in, let's say you go to college. I know everybody's not going to go to college, but let's just say college, because a lot of us, we meet people in college. The same time you're studying, you're in your major, you're doing internships, all those things, right? What are those things there for? To prepare you to do the job that you want, right? I would submit to you, I would like for a lot of young women out there, if they want those things, like we talked about, to be intentional about dating, so that they're learning the skills necessary to sustain a long-term relationship and leading to a marriage. The same way you put those skills to learning the book knowledge, the career experience, the hands-on skill, right? You can't just walk into a relationship and think just because men and women can like be intimate or we can hold hands or whatever, like that's a relationship skill. You got to build it. You have to refine it. You have to earn it. This isn't all on women. We got to do this too. But what I'm saying is, because women typically drive that level of relationship, marriage, we're getting to that point. What are we doing to help them realize, as hard as you're going to go for your career, again, nothing wrong with that. Please put in at least equal amount of effort to find somebody not only that you want to build with, but make sure you're learning the skills necessary to be ready for that person. What do you think about that?
I agree. And I think I could have been better at that. I think I it's funny because when I'm in a relationship, I'm so like thinking about the long term and like, are we going to get like, I don't live in the moment, but when I'm not in a relationship, I'm living in the moment and I'm not thinking about like I should, it's kind of reversed, I guess. Like I should be thinking more about how can I maintain a healthy relationship and what do I need to do to work on within myself so that I can be ready for a healthy relationship and attract the types of men that I want to attract, as opposed to just men that are, you know, not looking for the same things that I am. Right. But then when I'm in a relationship, then I'm like so focused on like that end goal that I'm not like nurturing the relationship. So it's like, I agree with you. I think that's something I think I could do better at, and like plan to do better at.
Okay. Hey, listen, much respect, because it took me a long time even to be able to put that into words. Like, that's not something I grew up knowing. It's not like anybody's taught me these things. I'm naturally a very curious person. I've just made a lot of observations over time. And
Yeah.
I think that that's where I kind of see this new wave of young people. This is something that I'm trying to offer to them as possibly a way to help them get all the things that they want. You want your career? Cool. If you want that family too, my whole point is just like, don't think you're just going to walk into it and it's just going to work. That would be like you walking into your career with no degree, no hands-on experience, and you think you're going to be able to do that job. You're not, because you're not prepared.
Yeah. And
You should put in equal preparation. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I was going to just add that I think also some of us were like modeled growing up, like really great examples of like love and what that looks like and what, you should be maybe more or less like looking for in your future relationships. Some of us weren't, and some of us were kind of like, oh, well, we want to do the opposite, or we know like we had to learn for ourselves. So I think for some people, I mean, it's going to take work for everybody, but maybe some people
Sure.
might take more work than somebody else.
No, absolutely. I mean, some people, we're actively unlearning things that were unhealthy from our upbringing. Some of us we had good example, and we're sort of trying to just recreate it as best as we can, maybe tailoring it a little bit more to us, but we're trying to recreate something that we've seen possible, which either way, there's no right or wrong in that context. I just mean it more in terms of, if you value something. I'm a big believer in, we put times into the things that matter. So if I know that I want that relationship, if I know I want that marriage, if I know I want that family in the future, let me put the time in now while I'm younger. Not necessarily that I have to be in the relationship, but be prepared for it.
Yeah.
Learn how to express and articulate how I learn to be agreeable, not so agreeable where you're on the extreme, but agreeable in terms of I must also know how to compromise. Because relationships are not one-sided. We don't want dictatorships. We want to work together. Somebody's going to lead, but we still need to be able to communicate with each other about how we're going to make decisions ultimately as a unit. Yeah. So those are skills that you don't necessarily have to be in a relationship in. And also, even if you're going to date, maybe before you find that person that you want to commit to for, a marriage, you can still be learning. You can always be learning. So let's make sure we're taking advantage of that time, because then I would submit to you, I think we'd actually decrease the amount of time it would take to find a suitable partner. Because then I've been acting with so much intention more often than not, that maybe when I'm 26, maybe when I'm 28, I've already found the person we've been dating, and we've gotten to that point where we've been communicating so well that we both know that we have the same shared family vision. And we have a really good idea of how we want to create it. Not just, I'm going to meet him, I'm going to meet her, and then we're just going to make it work. That's a fantasy. That's not real.
Yeah.
Relationships actually require work from both parties, because I am not you and you are not me. So we have to learn how to work together. So I don't want us operating from like a delusional perspective, where it's like, I can just find somebody and it'll happen, because when I'm ready, they'll be ready, and we'll just all make it be lovely, like a Disney fairy tale. And I'm like, I like the idea of it, but unfortunately in practice, it doesn't follow that way. So let's just be intentional. If we want our career's fine. But if you want a family, operate intentionally to learn how to become the thing that you want. You want a husband? Learn how to be a wife. You want a wife? Learn how to be a husband.
That was good.
It's important. If you don't learn how to do it, then how do you expect to know how to do it? Let's just use a little common sense here. We have to do these things. So I'm just submitting to you and to everybody who's listening, the same way we would work towards learning a skill, a trade, a career. When we go to university and we study, right? The same approach we would have, take it that serious with that relationship, with that person, with that potential family that you can have in the future. Any other thoughts on that, or is that
nicely said?
Okay. I will get off my soapbox. Thank you all for indulging me and saying that, because I'm working on saying that more and more polished, but it really speaks to me. That's a huge reason why, I spoke to you today. Why I was so happy that you were willing to come on and really bear a lot of your soul and share a lot with us that you've gone
Mhm.
through. And I really appreciate you for saying that. I hope I honored you by being able to engage in a meaningful discussion with you. And I'm sure anybody who watches or listens will really gain some valuable insight and perspective. So thank you, Sydney, for being here. I hope anybody who watched this to the end, hopefully we were engaging enough for you, but please consider liking and commenting and subscribing, because it really helps to produce this content. This takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, especially for me, because I have a lot of other things that I do as well. But I really believe in the message. I really believe in us engaging with each other. I think it's one of these things that we need to, and we really can do a much better job in. So I'm just trying to be an example and show that it doesn't have to be like these hostile discussions. Even if we don't agree, we can agree to disagree, but we can still be civil and respectful to one another. So again, I appreciate you so much for being here. And until next time, please keep an eye out. We will have more things coming out soon. I'll have some more great guests like Sydney here. So keep your eyes on my channel, and I'll see you all next time. Peace out.